Mr. Edmondson, Mr. Dibdin and Mr. Davies worked through the week to get Di finished. His significantly reduced overhaul had cut as many corners as possible, leaving lots of problems unresolved. Mr. Julian, Mr. Stovall and Mr. Anthony tried their best to repair the Avon Leeward cliff top, but it was no good. The track bed needed a lot more work, and many sleepers needed relaying. By Friday evening, Mr. Edmondson finally announced that Di was in a state to test his boiler. The boiler inspector paid a special visit to the shed.
You know, as a friend, you're lucky I am a supporter of this line, Mr. Edmondson. I should charge you double time for calling me out on a Friday night.
Ah, come on, Alfred. You just know how tight we're cutting it. Our first train is tomorrow.
Then let's hope this engine of yours passes the exam. It doesn't look like you've even started his overhaul.
I can assure you that we have done everything we can, sir. I just hope it's enough.
Well, his boiler was in good nick, despite being in a scrapyard for several years. They did a great job in crew. I've inspected much worse boilers than this one, Mr. Davies.
Well, did we pass?
Yes, Mr. Davies. I am happy to say that your engine's boiler has met all legal standards as set by the Boiler Inspectorate. I will sign a certificate for you. This certificate is only valid for 1 year.
Aren't boiler certificates supposed to last 10 years, Mr. Inspector?
Yes, but I am giving a restricted certificate because he will need a full overhaul sooner rather than later. I just hope he'll last long enough to prove himself.
Only 1 year, but surely that isn't enough time.
Relax, Mr. Stovall. Once the inspection is complete, we'll have more of a leg to stand on to the railway community. I am hoping that we can persuade someone else to bring their engine here.
Now that Mr. Hancock has withdrawn his support, that won't be easy, Mr. Davies.
Don't worry, Di will be alright. Won't you, Di?
Yes, I will.
I just hope that welded frame holds.
Di was nervous. Despite just having passed his boiler examination and being steamed up again for the first time in years, he felt terrible. The idea of his frames being so fragile scared him, and he was dreading his first run. Well, we ought to make this our first test run. We only have a couple of hours until the opening of the line, and we still don't know if these coaches will run properly. Mr. Davies' worries were well founded, as they were soon to find out. They climbed into Di's cab. Well, Di, this is it. Are you ready? No? Right, he's ready. Right away, driver. And with clouds of smoke and steam, Di moved forward and out of the workshop. He felt stiff as his valve gear creaked and groaned into action at last. He winced in pain as his valve gear ground together. Ugh, I'm stiff. I'm so stiff. Keep going, Di. You can do it. Di puffed harder, and soon he felt the grease and oil working its way into the system. It felt wonderful, and the pain ceased very quickly. He gave a loud toot on his whistle. Just then he heard a cheer, and suddenly realised that a crowd of townspeople had gathered on the road to watch his first journey.
Well, we'll have an audience tonight, Mr. Davies. You should put on a show for them.
No show tonight, Mr. Dibdin. It's all about keeping these wheels turning. There'll be no thrashing or second valves until Di is restored properly.
I know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
I know what you meant, Mr. Dibdin. And don't you worry, we already have put on enough of a show for these people tonight. They're counting on us, you know. And we are counting on you, Di. Mr. Edmondson switched the points, and Di reversed onto the main platform of Line Deerdog Station. Here, he was coupled up to his coaches for the first time. A crowd of people had gathered on the platform, taking Di's photograph as the crew coupled him up.
Okay, the vac bags are connected. Open the ejector, please.
Right you are.
Mr. Dibdin opened the ejector, and Di felt the rush of steam passing through his smokebox. My ejector's leaking.
Aye, I'll sort it out later, Di. We've got bigger problems right now.
Bigger problems?
Look, some brakes haven't come off properly.
Is that a problem?
Well, not if you want coaches to have a wheel flats. Of course it's a blooming problem.
Hit it with a hammer, Matthew.
Mr. Edmondson hit the brake pad with a hammer, and it finally released.
See? Always works. If in doubt, give it a clout.
I hope you don't adopt the same philosophy when you're driving my engine, Mr. Dibdin. Mr. Julian, who would act as guard, came to the engine.
Alright, all my checks are done, Mr. Davies. I've spoken with the signalman at Penwyth Junction. We have permission to run as far as Penwyth, then run around and return to Llandeardog.
But I thought we were going to run into Blaenberris.
British Railways changed their minds. They won't let us run on the main line until we get our Light Railway Act.
Well, that's fair enough, I suppose. There's nothing we can do about it right now. Are you ready, Di? Right, he's ready. Let's get going. It's 8 PM now. I want to get some sleep before we open tomorrow. Mr. Julian the guard blew his whistle and waved his flag, and with clouds of smoke and steam, Di set off along the line. He felt the weight of his coaches immediately. Di puffed harder, and soon they headed out of the Llandeardog's suburbs. Crowds of people had gathered on the hillsides to wish them well. Di looked closely. He swore he could see a familiar figure in the crowd of people. But before he could check himself, the figure had disappeared. Di puffed onwards, and soon reached a steep gradient towards Pantygassog. Mr. Edmondson, who was firing, stoked Di's fire for the long drag. Di felt happy as he felt the warmth of the fire heating his boiler and the rush of wind passing his funnel. They headed into the first tunnel. Di loved tunnels. He always felt so powerful when they were inside. The noise was tremendous. Soon they came out of the tunnel and slowed for arrival at Pantygassog station. Here a large crowd welcomed them. Di's brakes were applied, and soon the train came to a stand. Di felt happier than ever before. Everything was going so smoothly. Or so he thought.
Well, Coach 3's brakes are jammed on again. I've tried bashing it with a hammer, but it's not working.
Let me try.
And with his brutal northern strength, Mr. Edmondson smashed the brake pads free once again, and the coach rolled backwards slightly as the brakes released.
Works every time.
So far so good. Let's keep up the good work, lads. Mr. Julian went to the level crossing gates, and when he was ready, blew his whistle and waved his flag to call them forward across the crossing. Di set off, dragging the elderly coaches behind him. He rolled over the level crossing as crowds of people stood by, cheering. Once the train had passed, Mr. Julian closed the gates and climbed aboard. Mr. Edmondson had stoked Di's fire ready for the next section of line.
It's a long climb from here up to the cliff top. Plus, we'll have to slow down for that bad bit.
Di felt nervous as Mr. Dibdin opened the regulator. Soon Di was making good time as they approached the incline. He felt the load come onto the drawbar, and he pulled hard. Mr. Edmondson checked him.
Steady, Di, take it easy. We've got plenty of steam.
Di didn't feel so confident, but soon he saw the bridge and the tunnel mouth ahead. Mr. Dibdin closed the regulator and slowed down. He felt himself slowing, but just before he reached a standstill, Mr. Dibdin had opened the regulator again. Di puffed onwards and soon emerged on the Avonlewid cliff top. This was the section he had been dreading.
Steady, Di. Steady.
Di puffed onwards. He looked at the track as he went, and he could see just how bad the supporting wall had become. He continued on carefully, and soon felt himself leaning over towards the river. "I don't like this. I thought we fixed this section." Mr. Edmondson opened the regulator again, and Di powered onwards. Soon, the coaches drew clear of the cliff top, and they set off again. Di felt much happier now, and the level gradient gave him a chance to catch his breath. Di wasn't as fit as he used to be. They rolled into Pontymoyle, and once again a crowd had gathered to see the train pass through. Mr. Dibdin and Mr. Edmondson went to check the coaches, while Mr. Davies stoked the fire. Soon they were ready to leave, but Mr. Dibdin noticed something peculiar. A bus was waiting just before the level crossing. There was a familiar figure sitting at the controls.
No! That cannot be!
But before he could continue his sentence, Mr. Julian blew his whistle and waved his flag, and Di set off again. Mr. Edmondson saw the same figure sat in the driver's seat.
Is that who I think it is?
Did you see him too?
Yes, I did.
See who?
It was Mr. Bruce driving that bus.
Driving a bus? No, come on. Pull the other one.
I'm being serious, Mr. Davies. It was him, I'm sure of it.
Well, even if it was, we have more important things to consider right now. We can discuss this later. Mr. Dibdin and Mr. Edmondson fell silent. They were sure that it was Mr. Bruce, but they knew they had a job to do, so they put it out of their minds. Di trundled along at a steady pace as they began to climb towards Abersaif. The train pulled into a deserted station. The sun was beginning to set, and the temperature beginning to fall.
Where is everyone? I thought they wanted to see us.
It's getting late. We need to pick up the pace. We'll have to run non-stop to Penwyth Junction. Mr. Dibdin took on water, while Mr. Edmondson and Mr. Julian set the points for the next section.
I'll be happy when we've got a signalman to do this, Mr. Julian.
You and me both.
They soon set off and began to climb the Penwyth beacons. The sun finally set as they passed through Nanty Glyn, and Mr. Davies gave a long hard whistle as they passed his house.
I noticed that you've put your own whistle boards upside your house, Mr. Davies.
How can you run a railway without having some fun, eh? Di felt cheered up by this, and began to forget about the pain in his frames. He trundled along through the Welsh countryside steadily. They soon reached the summit of the line, and Di began to coast towards Pennyog Station. They steamed past Pennyog Colliery and rushed through Blind Coed. Finally, with some relief, they reached Journey's End and crossed the Penwyth Valley Viaduct, rolling into Penwyth Junction only 9 minutes late. Di felt relieved and very happy to have made his first journey in years. He was uncoupled and they quickly ran around the train. Sadly though, the return journey wouldn't be as easy.
Come on, Thomas, stop messing about. Have you connected the hoses?
Yes, I have! Open the ejector!
I have opened the blooming injector. Got 21 inches on my gauge.
But the brakes are hard on.
Then you haven't connected the vac bag.
I have connected the ruddy vac bag, Matthew.
Whoa! Gentlemen, please, settle down. Let's sort this out calmly. We won't get anywhere by shouting. The coach's brakes were jammed hard on, and no matter how many times Matthew opened the ejector to create a vacuum, they would not release. They worked and worked and worked, but still, no matter how hard they tried, the brakes on the coaches would not release. The night wore on, and soon it was very dark.
Well guys, look, it's nearly midnight. We need to be getting back. I think it's fair to say we cannot fix this here. The vacuum cylinders need to be removed and overhauled. They're just shot.
Agreed.
But what are we going to do about the coaches? We cannot pull coaches with no brakes. The inspectors won't like that.
What is the problem?
Just then, Mr. Julian remembered something.
I'll tell you an idea. If we can remove the brake blocks from these coaches, then just pull a brake van as well?
The workmen thought for a moment, and then Mr. Edmondson laughed.
Mr. Julian, that's a brilliant idea.
That would work.
Is that legal?
Well, Mr. Dibdin, is it legal?
Yes, of course it is. But it won't be comfortable for the passengers. But as long as there is some form of brake vehicle attached to the train, it doesn't matter if it's a coach or a brake van.
There we go. Problem solved. Excellent thinking, Mr. Julian.
I'm not just a pretty face, you know.
Di simmered impatiently as the workmen removed the brake blocks from the coaches. This proved to be dangerous work, as the coaches shifted each time a block was removed. Time marched onwards, and by 6 o'clock in the morning, the train was finally ready to leave. Tired, beaten, and exhausted, the engine crew climbed back into Di's cab, and they set off along the line at last. The sun rose above the mountains, lighting up the valley as Di puffed along the line, his coaches bouncing loudly behind them. It was very late indeed when they finally returned to Llandiadog. Instead of the service and the rest that Di had been hoping for all night, his train was shunted straight into the platform, and Di was cold and watered, ready for the first train. Come on, please, can we have a rest? No, Di. We need to get ready for the first train. You can have a break for half an hour while we call you up and get the brake van ready, but don't you go to sleep. But it was too late. Di had fallen asleep. Mr. Davies chuckled to himself and climbed into Leslie's cab to collect the brake van. The train was shunted and made ready, and by 9 o'clock, the passengers were climbing aboard the first train. Mr. Davies was shocked to see that so many people had turned up for the first train.
Blimey, we'll need the Royal Scot for this blooming lot.
And the Flying Scotsman too.
The passengers climbed aboard, buzzing excitedly. Di was made ready for his first journey. Leslie and Ian called out to Di from the shed.
Good luck, Di.
Best of luck.
Thanks, guys. We'll be okay, you know that.
Yes, we will. We've made it this far, right?
Di backed down onto the coaches, and Mr. Davies came to speak to him. Well, all set, Di? All set, sir. That's the spirit. Let's do this. Soon enough, he had reached Penwyth Junction, and he slowed to a stand at the platform. He felt very proud of what he and the team had achieved today. Mr. Davies came to see him again. "Well done, Di. We did it. We've done it, lads."
I cannot believe we've pulled this off. After all the problems we've had, we've bloomin' won.
You never gave up, gentlemen.
The crewmen looked around in shock, and standing there was Mr. Hancock, one of the potential investors of the line, and his daughter Kyrie. He had returned to the line to see how they did on their first open day.
Mr. Davies, I believe I owe you an apology, sir.
An apology? Whatever for?
For being so quick to make a judgment against you. Mistakes happen, and no matter how hard you try, problems will always arise. You could have brand new machines, but if they break down, you need to have what it takes to solve the problem. But you have proved to me you have what it takes. I must say that I'm very glad to be giving you a second chance. I withdraw my earlier statement. I am most definitely interested in investing this line.
Mr. Davies felt stunned. He didn't know what to say.
But only if there's an approval from other investors. I have to know that I'm bringing my engine and rolling stock to a railway that is secure. Keep on running at these high standards, and you'll have no trouble convincing the board of investors to back our cause.
Our cause?
What do you mean, our cause?
Yes, sir, our cause. I'm in the process of making a business plan for this line. In order to convince the other investors, we need to have a solid business plan in place. And after what I've seen today, I believe we have one. Many thanks for your time, gentlemen. I'll be seeing you all again very soon.
Di felt the water in his boiler boil in excitement. They had finally achieved some success. Di returned to the shed that night and was given 3 cheers by the engines and volunteers. The engines chatted whilst the volunteers celebrated their first running day.
Well done, Di. You did it.
It's been a long struggle up until now. It's nice to see some results.
Yes, it is.
You tired, Di?
Yeah. I've been up for the last 48 hours without a break. I'm not as young as you pair, you know. The engines laughed, but as Di closed his eyes, in the back of his mind was the deep feeling of responsibility. He knew that the whole operation relied on his reliability and his determination. As the volunteers celebrated, Di fell asleep, a happy and contented engine.